I have taken the same commuter line for 6 years. The 5:47 outbound, car 3 from the front, the bench seat against the west window because the afternoon light comes in low and I can read without the glare. 6 years is long enough that the conductor knows the back of my head, long enough that I know which floor tiles at my home station are loose, which escalator panel rattles, and which advertising frame above seat 14B has been broken since the winter my mother died. 6 years of a thing happening the same way is nothing. It is a small piece of architecture you build inside your life, and you don't notice you've built it until a tile shifts. Yesterday, the train skipped my stop. I want to be precise about this because precision is the only thing I have left, and I'm aware of how I sound. I was not asleep. I was not on my phone. I was reading a paperback. The Daughter of Time, Josephine Tay, a used copy with a coffee ring on page 40, and I felt the deceleration that always precedes Wexler Avenue. The brakes engage in 2 stages on this line. There is a long sigh, and then a shorter, harder one, and the second one is when I close my book and stand up. I closed my book. I stood up. I took 2 steps toward the doors, and the train kept moving, not fast, not violently. It just didn't stop. The deceleration leveled off and then reversed into a soft acceleration, the way you might ease a car back into traffic. The platform at Wexler Avenue slid past my window with its familiar yellow tile and its familiar bent lamppost, and the familiar man in the orange vest who sweeps the north end every evening at 6. I watched him watch the train go by without expression, and then he was gone. I looked at the woman sitting opposite me. She had not looked up from her phone. I looked at the man 2 rows ahead, who I had seen 100 times and never spoken to. A balding man with reading glasses pushed up onto his forehead. He was working through a folded newspaper with a ballpoint pen. He had not looked up either. Nobody had looked up. The intercom did not chime. The conductor did not walk through. The train accepted the missed stop the way a body accepts a swallow. I sat down again. I sat down because standing up felt like accusing the train of something, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. I told myself the obvious things. Mechanical issue, track work, a signal somewhere ahead. The next stop is Halbrook, 4 minutes out, and I would simply get off there and walk back, or catch the inbound, and tomorrow I would call the transit office and complain like a person who has been mildly inconvenienced. The train stopped at Holbrook. The doors opened. I got off. I walked the 1.25 miles back to my apartment in the cold, and by the time I reached my building I had constructed an entire reasonable narrative in which the conductor had misjudged the platform and would be reprimanded by his supervisor, and I had been chosen by the universe to be the one person on car 3 who actually needed Wexler Avenue, and the universe was sorry, and tomorrow would be ordinary. Tomorrow is today. And today the train will not let me get off. I'm going to tell you what happened in the order it happened, because the order matters. Some of it I didn't understand until later. Some of it I'm still not sure about. But the order is the one piece of evidence I have left that this is happening to me and not inside me, and I'd like to keep it. My name doesn't matter for this, but my life does. A little, so you understand what I had to lose. I am 41. I work in the accounts department of a mid-sized commercial insurance brokerage downtown, the kind of office that occupies 1.5 floors of a building nobody photographs, where the carpet is grey and the printers are loud and the work is the work. I'm not married. I was for 9 years, and we split amicably enough that we still exchange birthday texts. I live alone in a 1-bedroom on the 4th floor of a converted warehouse in a neighborhood that used to be industrial and is now mostly coffee shops. I have a cat named Pim who is 15 and arthritic and sleeps on a heating pad. I see my sister and her kids on alternate Sundays. I read at night. I take the train. That is the whole shape of it. I am telling you this because horror, in my experience, is not what happens to people with interesting lives. It is what happens to people whose lives are arranged the way mine is arranged, a series of dependable surfaces, and then one of the surfaces tilts. The morning after the skip, I called the Transit Authority's customer line. I sat at my desk during my coffee break with the door closed, and I told a polite young man named Devin that my train had failed to stop at Wexler Avenue at approximately 6:11 the previous evening, and that I would like, if possible, an explanation. Devin put me on hold for 4 minutes. When he came back, he said there was no record of any service irregularity on that line that evening. No skipped stops, no missed dwell times, no maintenance interruptions. He asked, kindly, if I was certain about the date. I said I was certain. He asked if I would like to file a formal complaint anyway. I said yes. He took my information. He said someone would follow up within 5 to 7 business days. We both knew nobody would. I want you to notice that I did the reasonable thing. I tried the official channel first. I'm telling you this because later, when you wonder why I didn't go to the police, or to the news, or to a lawyer, I want you to remember that I started with the polite young man named Devin, and Devin had no record of the thing that happened to me. After the call, I sat at my desk and tried to do my actual job, but I could not. I kept replaying the moment the brakes leveled out. I kept seeing the man with the orange vest, watching the train pass without surprise. That was the part that bothered me most, in retrospect. Not the skip itself, but the absence of any reaction from anyone who should have reacted. As if the train passing Wexler Avenue without stopping was, for everyone else in the world, a normal event. By 5:30, I had convinced myself I was being ridiculous. By 5:40, I was on the platform. By 5:47, I was on the train, in car 3 on the bench seat against the west window with my paperback open to page 42. The train pulled out of downtown on schedule. The intercom announced Carlisle, then Riverside North, then Beecham Park. At Eastop Street, the doors opened, closed, said, and people got on and off, and the small economy of a commuter car rearranged itself. I felt the muscles in my shoulders loosen. I was being ridiculous. The skip was a one-time event, an aberration, and now things were going to be ordinary again. We approached Wexler Avenue. I felt the first stage of the break. I closed my book. I felt the second stage. I stood up. The doors did not open. The train had stopped. I want to be clear about that. The train had stopped fully at the platform. I could see Wexler Avenue through the window. The same yellow tile, the same bent lamppost. The man in the orange vest leaning on his broom with his back to the train. The dwell was the right length 15-20 seconds, and then the train started moving again. Smoothly, and Wexler Avenue slid past my window and the doors had never opened. I looked at the door. I looked at the strip of black rubber along its seam. I had pressed the button. Had I pressed the button? On this line, you don't have to press a button. The doors open automatically at every stop. I had ridden this train 5,000 times and never once pressed a button. There was no button to press. I looked around the car. The woman opposite me, a different woman, this time younger, with earbuds, was looking at her phone. The man 2 rows ahead was a different man, but he was also reading, also unbothered. Across the aisle, a woman in a green coat met my eyes for exactly 1 second and then looked away. The way you look away from someone who has just made a small mistake in public. I sat down. My hands were cold. I told myself the doors had malfunctioned. I told myself this was the kind of thing that happens, technically, on commuter rail, and that I would get off at Hallbrook and walk back like I had the night before. Except this time I would also write a letter, a proper letter, on paper, and I would send it certified mail to the Transit Authority's complaints department, and there would be a record. Halbrook came up. The brakes engaged. I stood up before the second stage. I positioned myself directly in front of the doors so that when they opened I could step out before anything else strange happened. The train stopped. The doors opened. People got off. People got on. I stepped forward. A man stepped into my path. Not aggressively, he was getting on the train carrying a backpack, and he simply was where I needed to be, and by the time he had moved past me, the doors were closing. I lunged. My fingertips brushed the rubber gasket. The doors shut firmly and the train began to move. I stood there for a long moment, looking at the closed doors, breathing through my mouth. Then I turned and looked at the man with the backpack. He had taken a seat near the front of the car. He was looking at his phone. He had not, as far as I could tell, registered that he had just prevented me from getting off the train. I tried again at the next stop. Cabot Square. I positioned myself by a different door, the rear door of car 3, where there had been no one waiting on the platform the entire ride. The train stopped. The doors opened. I stepped forward. The doors closed. Not on me. There was no contact, no pressure, no sense of being squeezed out. The doors simply closed at a speed that, if I had taken one more step, would have caught me. I jerked back. The train moved. I stood in the aisle and looked at the empty platform sliding past, and the woman in the green coat from before, she had not gotten off either, I noticed looked up at me from her seat, and her expression was, I think, what finally broke me. It was no surprise. It was not a concern. It was a small, sympathetic pity, the kind of look you give a stranger who has just realized something embarrassing about themselves in public. I made it home that night. I did. I want to tell you that immediately so the rest of this isn't unbearable. I made it home by riding the train all the way to its terminus at Edgewater, where everyone gets off because there is no further to go, and I got off with them, and I caught the inbound back to Howlbrook, and I walked the 1.25 miles to my apartment in the cold for the second night in a row. I sat on my couch with Pim on my lap and a glass of bourbon I do not normally drink, and I tried to think about what was happening to me in the calmest and most rational terms I could find. 2 days. 2 failures. The first day the train didn't stop. The second day it stopped. But the doors didn't open. Each event, taken alone, was the kind of thing that could be explained by a mechanical fault or a human error, or a moment of inattention. Taken together, they suggested a pattern. But a pattern of what? A pattern in the train or a pattern in me? I considered seriously whether I was having some kind of episode. A small stroke maybe, the kind that doesn't show up except in tiny gaps in perception. I have a cousin who had one in her 40s and didn't realize for 3 days. I considered whether I was depressed in a way I hadn't noticed, whether stress at work had reached some threshold I'd missed. I considered whether the divorce 4 years on had finally produced a delayed grief that was rearranging my sense of the world. What I did not consider that night was that the train was doing something to me on purpose. That came later. The third day I drove to work. This is worth noting because I do not own a parking spot downtown, and the cost of parking near my office for one day was more than my round-trip fare for a week, and I paid it without thinking, which tells you something about the state I was in. I sat at my desk in a building I usually approached on foot from the station, and the light came through the windows at the wrong angle, and I felt, all day, like I was visiting someone else's life. At 5, I drove home. The drive took 45 minutes in traffic. The commute by train normally takes 22 minutes. I sat in my car on the bridge over the river and watched the commuter line in the distance, the silver cars moving smoothly along the elevated track, and I thought, that's where I'm supposed to be. That train is going north right now. That's mine, and I'm not on it. The feeling that gave me was not relief. It was the opposite of relief. It was the feeling of having stepped out of a line that I was supposed to be in. I got home. I fed Pim. I made a sandwich and ate half of it. I told myself I would drive to work every day from now on indefinitely and absorb the cost, and that would be the end of it. The train could do whatever it was doing without me. I would simply opt out. I went to bed at 10:30. I could not sleep. At 1 in the morning, I got up and stood at the window of my apartment, which faces east toward the rail line, 3 blocks away and 1 story up from the street. I could not see the tracks from my window, but I could see the orange glow of the platform lights at Halbrook, faint through the bare branches of the trees along the canal. I stood there for a long time. I do not know what I was waiting for. I do not know what I thought I would see. At 2:10, I heard a train go by. The commuter line does not run between midnight and 4:30 on weekdays. I checked. I have checked many times. There was a train at 2:10 on a Wednesday morning, on a line that does not run at 2:10 on a Wednesday morning, and the sound of it carried perfectly clearly through my closed window. The long sigh of the first stage break, then a pause, then nothing. No second stage, no departure. The train, whichever train it was, had stopped at Holbrook and not started again. I waited at the window for an hour. I did not hear it leave. In the morning, when I left my apartment to walk to my car, I did not look in the direction of the station. I drove to work for 3 more days. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The drive became part of my new life. I started leaving the house at 6:30 instead of 7 to beat the worst of the traffic, and I bought a coffee from a different place than I usually did, and I parked in a different garage each day because none of them had monthly rates available on short notice. I was performing a person who had simply chosen to drive to work. On Friday afternoon around 3, my sister called me. She does not normally call me during the workday. She called me because she had stopped by my apartment on her way back from a doctor's appointment to drop off a casserole dish she'd borrowed, and she had let herself in with her spare key, and Pim was not in the apartment. I went home immediately. I told my supervisor my cat was missing, which was true, and she gave me the sympathetic half-smile that childless women in their 40s get when they explain why they are leaving work early, and I left. The apartment was the way I had left it that morning. The bedroom door was open. The bathroom door was open. The closet door was closed. There was no sign of Pim. There was no sign of forced entry. The windows were locked. My sister was sitting on my couch crying because Pim is 15 and she loves him, and she was the one who had given him to me when my marriage ended, and she felt responsible. I checked every room twice. I checked under the bed, behind the radiator, inside the bathtub, on top of the kitchen cabinets, in the hall closet, and in the laundry hamper. I checked the fire escape. I checked the hallway. I knocked on my neighbours' doors. Nobody had seen a cat. Pim is arthritic. He sleeps on a heating pad for 16 hours a day. He has not jumped further than the height of the couch in 2 years. He could not have gotten out on his own. I sat on the couch with my sister and we tried to figure out what had happened. She had been in the apartment for maybe 90 seconds. She had not left the door open. She had not seen him on the way in. She had walked through to the kitchen to put the dish away and then noticed she didn't hear him and started looking. "Did you have anyone over last night?" she asked me. I had not. "Did the building have any work done? Anyone come in to check the radiators?" They had not, as far as I knew. I told her I would call the building manager. I told her it would be all right. I told her Pim was probably hiding somewhere I hadn't thought to look, and he would come out when he was hungry, and I would call her in the morning. She left around 6. I stood in my empty apartment with the casserole dish on the counter and the heating pad still warm, RM, and I knew, in a way I could not have explained to anyone, that Pim was not hiding. I knew where he was. I did not know how I knew, but I knew. I put on my coat. I walked to Halbrook Station. I bought a ticket on the inbound, even though there was no reason to go inbound at 6 in the evening, and I got on the train and I sat in car 3 on the bench seat against the west window. The train pulled out of Holbrook. The intercom announced Wexler Avenue. I felt the first stage of the brake. I closed my hands around the edge of the seat. I felt the second stage. The train stopped. The doors opened. I did not move. The doors stayed open for the full dwell time. People got on and off. Nobody looked at me. The doors closed. The train began to move. And I sat there, riding the inbound away from Halbrook, away from my apartment, into the city I had just driven away from an hour and a half before, and I understood that the train had given me back Wexler Avenue. The train had returned the stop it had taken from me because I was on it now, going the other way, and the rules, whatever the rules were, required that I be allowed to leave Wexler Avenue at least as freely as I had been prevented from leaving it. The train was not stopping me from getting off. It was stopping me from going home. I rode the train into the city. I rode it all the way to the downtown terminus. I got off because everyone got off. I stood on the platform and watched the train sit empty for its layover. And then I watched the cleaning crew come through. And then I watched it fill again, with the late commuters going outbound. And at 7:40 I got back on and rode it outbound to Halbrook, and got off at Holbrook because the doors opened and nobody was in my way. And I walked home. Pim was on his heating pad. I want you to understand what that was like. I had been gone from the apartment for nearly 3 hours. I had searched it thoroughly before I left. My sister had searched it. He had not been in it. And when I walked through the door, he was on his heating pad in the position he is always in, curled with his tail over his nose, and when he heard me come in and he opened one eye and blinked at me the way he always does. I sat down on the floor next to him and I cried for about 20 minutes. He let me put my hand on his back. He purred. He was warm. He was real. I called my sister and told her I had found him hiding in the bedroom closet, behind a box of winter clothes. She was so relieved she did not ask how I had missed him the first 3 times I looked there. I do not know if she believed me. I am not sure I cared. I did not sleep that night. I sat on the couch with Pim on my lap, and I tried to think. The train had taken something from me. Not Pim exactly. Pim was here. But the train had used Pim, or used the absence of Pim, to make a point. The point was, you have not opted out. You think you have opted out by driving to work, but you have not opted out. I can reach into your apartment. I can reach into the parts of your life that have nothing to do with me. The train is not where I live. The train is where you and I meet. That was the first time I thought of it as having a will. I want to mark that moment because I think it was the moment I crossed something. Until then, I had been thinking of the train as malfunctioning. After that, I was thinking of the train as deciding. Saturday morning, I went back to the train. I want to be honest with you about this. I did not have to. I could have called in sick on Monday. I could have applied for remote work. I could have moved. I could have done any of 100 things that would have meant I never had to set foot on the platform at Halbrook again. I went back because I needed to know what it wanted. The Saturday morning train is half empty. I got on at Halbrook at 9:15 and sat in car 3 on the bench seat against the west window. The train pulled out. The intercom announced Wexler Avenue. I did not stand up. I wanted to see what would happen if I did not attempt to get off. The train approached Wexler Avenue. The brakes engaged. The first stage, then the second. The train stopped. The doors opened. The doors stayed open. They stayed open past the dwell time. They stayed open for 30 seconds, then 45, then a full minute. The intercom did not chime. The conductor did not announce a delay. Nobody on the platform got on. Nobody in the car got off. I looked around the car. There were maybe a dozen people. None of them was looking at me. None of them was looking at the open doors. They were all simply waiting, the way people wait for a train delay, except none of them seemed surprised or impatient. They were waiting for me. I sat very still on the bench seat. The doors stayed open. The cold air from the platform came into the car. A pigeon walked across the open doorway, looked into the car, and walked away. After what I estimated to be 3 minutes, I was afraid to look at my phone. The doors closed. The train began to move. Nobody on the train reacted. The man across the aisle turned a page in his newspaper. I rode to Wexler Avenue's neighbour stops, Carlisle and Beecham Park, and the train stopped at both of them normally. Doors open for 15 seconds, doors close, train moves. At the city terminus, I got off and rode back to Holbrook on the inbound. And on the inbound, Dalton the train did the same thing in reverse. At Wexler Avenue, the doors opened and stayed open for 3 minutes, while nobody got on or off, and nobody acknowledged the delay. I understood then that the train was not stopping me from getting off. The train was waiting for me to get off, at Wexler Avenue, only at Wexler Avenue, the stop I had originally tried to take on day one, the stop the train had skipped. The train wanted me to get off at Wexler Avenue, and every time I tried to get off anywhere else, it would prevent me, and every time I tried to opt out, it would reach into my life and take something to remind me that opting out was not on the table. I went home. I sat on my couch. I tried to think about what was on Wexler Avenue. Wexler Avenue is not a destination. It is one of the smaller stops on the line, in a neighbourhood of low brick buildings and a few warehouses converted to artist studios and a stretch of canal that nobody walks along after dark. There is a corner store, a Vietnamese restaurant, a tax preparer's office, and a laundromat. There used to be a bookstore, but it closed. There is a bus stop with a route that runs to the hospital. There is, on the corner of Wexler and 6th, a small park with a bench and 3 trees where in the summer people sometimes eat their lunch. There was no reason for the train to want me at Wexler Avenue. I had never gotten off at Wexler Avenue. Wexler Avenue was for me a name that the intercom said between Carlisle and Halbrook. It was the stop before mine. It was in the geography of my life simply the warning that I should close my book. But the train wanted me there. I sat on the couch all afternoon and I tried to remember if there was anything at Wexler Avenue. Anyone. A reason. A connection. I could not think of one. I did not know anyone who lived in that neighborhood. I had no business there. The only times I had ever set foot on that platform were when I had missed my stop in the other direction and had to switch trains, and those had been brief and uneventful and years apart. I called my sister, ostensibly to follow up about Pim. We talked for an hour. I worked the conversation toward Wexler Avenue without quite asking, the way you ask about something you don't want to admit you're asking about. Did she know anyone who lived around there? Had I ever mentioned it to her? Had our parents, when we were kids, had any reason to go there? She didn't think so. She asked me if I was all right. I told her I was tired. I told her work was stressful. I told her I might take a few days off. That night, I dreamed about the train. In the dream, I was on the platform at Wexler Avenue, alone, and the train was sitting at the platform with its doors open, and inside the train, in car 3 on the bench seat against the west window, someone was sitting. I could not see their face. I knew that if I got on the train, I would see their face, and I knew that if I saw their face, I would understand everything, and I knew that I did not want to understand everything. I woke up at 4 in the morning. Pim was sitting on my chest, staring at the bedroom door. He does not normally do this. He is not a watchful animal. He is an old, sleepy cat. But he was sitting on my chest at 4 in the morning, alert, watching the door with his ears flat against his skull. And when I followed his gaze, I saw that the door, which I had closed before going to bed, was open about 6 inches. There was no one in my apartment. I checked. I checked everywhere, the way I had checked when Pim was missing. And there was no one. But the door was open. And Pim does not open doors. He cannot. His paws don't work that way and the latch is too high. I closed the door. I locked it. I went back to bed. I did not sleep again. I have been telling you this in order because the order matters, but I am going to break the order now to tell you about the woman in the green coat. I mentioned her earlier. She was on the train the second day, the day the doors didn't open at Wexler Avenue, the day I tried to push out at Holbrook, and a man with a backpack stepped into my path. She was the one who looked at me with that small pity when I failed to get off. I saw her again on the Saturday morning train, the one where the doors stayed open at Wexler Avenue for 3 minutes. She was sitting 4 rows ahead of me in a window seat, and she was wearing the same green coat, and she got on at Holbrook and got off at the city terminus, and I did not speak to her. I saw her again on Monday morning. On Monday I had decided I would try a new strategy. I would take the train into the city as normal, and at Wexler Avenue I would get off because that was apparently what the train wanted, and I would do whatever I needed to do at Wexler Avenue, find whatever I needed to find, see whoever I needed to see, and then I would resume my life, and the train would let me go. She got on at Holbrook in the same green coat and sat 4 rows ahead of me. She did not look at me when she got on. She did not look at me at any stop. But when the train pulled into Wexler Avenue and I stood up to get off, she stood up too. And when I stepped off onto the platform, she stepped off behind me. The train pulled away. I stood on the platform at Wexler Avenue for the first time in years. The man in the orange vest was at the north end, sweeping. The yellow tile was familiar in the way that things are familiar from photographs you've seen but not places you've been. The bent lamppost was bent. The woman in the green coat was standing about 10 feet behind me, looking at her phone. I walked toward the exit. She walked toward the exit behind me at the same pace. I stopped at the top of the stairs and pretended to check my phone. She stopped at the top of the stairs and checked hers. I turned around and looked at her directly. She was about my age, maybe a few years younger. Brown hair, no makeup, the kind of face that does not announce itself. She met my eyes. She did not look surprised that I had turned around. She did not look guilty. She looked more than anything tired. "Can I help you?" I said. She put her phone in her pocket. She looked at me for what felt like a long time. Then she said, "I'm sorry, I just wanted to see who you were." Who was I? The one it picked. I do not remember exactly what I said next. I think I said something like, "What are you talking about?" Or "What do you mean?" But I'm not sure, because my ears had started ringing and the platform had started to seem very far away. She said, "I rode it for about a month, 2 years ago." It let me off eventually. I still take the line sometimes. I have to. I work downtown and I always watch. You start to be able to tell, the way the doors hesitate, the way nobody else looks up. She paused. "I'm sorry, I didn't want to talk to you on the train. It doesn't like that." I asked her what it was. She looked at me with a kind of careful patience, the way you might look at a child who has asked a question that has no answer. "I don't know," she said. "I never figured that out. I only figured out how to make it stop." I asked her how. "You go to where it wants you," she said, "and you give it what it wants." "What does it want?" She shook her head. "That's different for everyone. For me, it was a place. There was a building on Wexler, the old one, the one they tore down last year. It was on the corner of 6th. And I had to sit in it. Just sit. For about an hour, 3 days in a row." She made a small, tired smile. "I know how that sounds." "What was in the building?" "Nothing. Empty rooms. Some pigeons." She shrugged. "I don't know why it wanted me there. I don't know why it wants you here. But it does. And if you don't go, it'll keep escalating. It took my mother's ashes." I stared at her. They were in an urn in my apartment. After I figured out what it wanted, when I sat in the building the 3rd day, the ashes were back. In the urn, on the shelf. I'd searched everywhere. They had not been there for 6 days. Her smile got smaller. "I never told anyone. I don't tell anyone. I'm telling you because I saw the green coat working and I thought it might help to know it ends." "It ends?" "It ended for me." She looked away, toward the exit. "I have to go to work. I'm sorry, I really am sorry. Try to figure out what it wants. Go where it tells you. Don't fight it for too long. It gets..." She searched for a word, creative. She walked past me and down the stairs and out of the station. I stood on the platform for I do not know how long. The man with the orange vest swept past me without looking up. A pigeon landed on the bench and looked at me sideways. The next train pulled in. People got on and off. The doors closed. The train left. I walked down the stairs. I came out onto Wexler Avenue. I stood on the corner of Wexler and 6th, where the woman in the green coat had said her building had been, and I looked at what was there now. What was there now was a construction site. A new building is going up, maybe 6 stories, the steel frame done and the lower floors enclosed in glass. A banner on the chain-link fence advertising luxury condominiums, occupancy next spring. A trailer for the contractor. A few hard hats are moving around. I stood there for a long time and I thought, the building she went to is gone. The place it wanted her is not a place anymore. Whatever the train wanted from me, it was not going to be the same as what it had wanted from her. The shape of the demand was the same: go to Wexler Avenue, do the thing, but the thing itself was specific to the person, and her thing had been demolished, and mine was something else. I walked around the neighborhood for 2 hours. I went into the Vietnamese restaurant, sat at the counter, and ate a bowl of pho that I did not taste. I walked past the laundromat, the tax preparers, and the corner store. I sat in the small park with the bench and the 3 trees and watched a man walk a small dog around the perimeter and leave. I went into the corner store, bought a bottle of water, and watched the clerk make change without looking at me. I walked along the canal for 2 blocks in each direction. Nothing in the neighborhood meant anything to me. I had no history here. I had no business here. I had no person here. There was no building I needed to sit in, no urn I needed to retrieve, no door I needed to open. I gave up at 1 in the afternoon and walked back to the station. I took the next outbound train to Holbrook. The train stopped at Wexler Avenue on the way, opened its doors, closed them, and continued. It stopped at Holbrook. The doors opened. I got off. I walked home. I went to bed at 8. I slept for 14 hours. I want to describe the dream I had that night because I think it matters, although I am still not sure what it means. In the dream, I was on the train, in car 3 on the bench seat against the west window, and the train was moving through a landscape I did not recognize, not the line's actual route, not the river or the bridges or the warehouses, but a flat, dark country with no lights in it. The train was the only light. The other people in the car were the people I have always seen on the train. The bald man with the reading glasses on his forehead, the young woman with the earbuds, the man with the backpack, the woman in the green coat. They were all there, in their usual seats doing their usual things. None of them looked out the windows. The train stopped. The intercom announced Wexler Avenue. The doors opened. On the platform was my mother. My mother died 11 years ago. She was 63. She had a heart attack on a Tuesday afternoon while she was putting groceries away. My sister found her. I was not there. I was at work, at a different job than the one I have now, and by the time I got to the hospital, she had been dead for an hour. They had cleaned her up and she looked like someone playing my mother in a movie, and I have spent 11 years trying not to think about that. In the doc regime, she was on the platform at Wexler Avenue. She was wearing the blue cardigan she wore when she gardened. She was looking at the train, at the open door, at me. She was smiling. She did not speak. She just stood there, smiling at me, waiting. And I knew, in the way you know things in dreams, that if I got off the train and walked up to her, the train would let me go. Whatever this was would end. I would be released. But I also knew, in the way you know things in dreams, that if I got off the train and walked up to her, the person standing there would not actually be my mother. It would be something using her shape, and once I had walked up to it and seen its face, I would not be able to unsee what was actually there, and the version of my mother I have carried in my memory for 11 years, the real version, the version that gardened in a blue cardigan and was alive, would be overwritten by whatever the thing on the platform looked like, up close. I sat on the bench seat. I did not get up. The doors stayed open. My mother stood on the platform and smiled. The other people in the car did not look up. After a long time, the doors closed. The train began to move. My mother stayed on the platform, watching me go, still smiling. As the train pulled away, she lifted her hand and waved. I woke up at 10 in the morning with my face wet and Pim purring against my neck, and the certainty, the absolute certainty, that I now knew what the train wanted. The train wanted me to get off at Wexler Avenue and meet my mother. That was the offer. That was the deal. Walk through the door, walk up to her, accept what was there. And I had understood in the dream that if I did that, I would lose her. Not gain her, lose her completely, the version I had kept. The train was not threatening me. The train was offering me a trade. It was the worst kind of trade, the kind that looks like a gift. I did not go to work that day. I sat on the couch and held P.I., and I thought about my mother. I have not been a person who talks about my mother. After she died, I went through the things you go through, the funeral and the will and the sorting of her house, and I came out the other end of those things mostly intact. And I built a life that did not require me to think about her every day. I think about her on her birthday. I think about her at Christmas. I think about her sometimes when I see a woman of her age in the grocery store, and the woman is wearing a sweater she might have worn. The thinking is small and contained, and it does not break me. The train was offering to break me. I do not know how it knew. I have asked myself this question many times. I have wondered whether the train pulled the image of my mother out of my dream because she was the most loaded thing in me, or whether the dream was something the train sent, or whether there is no difference between those two possibilities. I have wondered whether the woman in the green coat would have, if I had asked, said that her mother's ashes were also on the platform somehow, in some version of the offer, and that sitting in the empty building was the way she had said no. Because that is what I understood. Sitting on my couch on a Tuesday morning that should have been a work day. The trade was not the way out. The trade was the price. The woman in the green coat had sat in an empty building for an hour, 3 days in a row. She had not engaged with what the train was offering her. She had performed a small, neutral, meaningless ritual in the place the train told her to go, and the train had accepted it. And she had been released. She had refused the gift. She had paid in time and discomfort and the willingness to do a strange thing, and the train had let her go. But the building was gone now, and my offer was different. My offer was a person, not a place, and there was no empty building I could sit in for an hour to pay the train off, because the train had not asked me for a place. It had asked me for my mother. I did not know what the equivalent would be. I sat on the couch for a long time trying to figure out what the equivalent would be. I went back to Wexler Avenue the next morning. I took the outbound train at 5:47 from downtown. I had gone into the city in the morning, driven in, parked, gone to my office for an hour, told my supervisor I was not feeling well, and left. I did not want to take the inbound. I wanted to do this on the same train I had been on the night the skip happened. The 5:47, car 3, bench seat, west window, the train pulled out of downtown. I felt very calm. I had decided, in a way I could not have explained to anyone, that what I was going to do was get off at Wexler Avenue and walk the neighborhood until I found something, anything that I could perform a small, meaningless ritual at. A bench, a tree, a corner, a storm drain. I was going to pick a thing, and I was going to sit at it, or stand at it, or touch it for some period of time. And I was going to do that 3 days in a row, and I was going to do it without engaging with whatever the train was offering, without looking for my mother, without thinking about her, without giving the train the thing it actually wanted. I was going to pay the toll without buying the ticket. The intercom announced Carlisle. The intercom announced Beecham Park. The brakes engaged for Wexler Avenue. I stood up. I walked to the doors. The doors opened. I stepped off. The platform at Wexler Avenue at 6 in the evening is busier than at 9 in the morning. There were maybe 20 people on the platform waiting for the inbound or having just stepped off the outbound. The man in the orange vest was at the south end. The bent lamppost was bent. The yellow tile was yellow. My mother was at the north end of the platform. I want to describe what this was like because I do not have the words for it, and I have to try. She was not the woman from my dream. She was not wearing the blue cardigan. She was wearing a wool coat, the grey one she had owned in the last years of her life, and a scarf I remembered. She was standing about 40 feet away by the bent lamppost, and she was looking at me, and she was real in a way I do not know how to convey, except to say that I could see the way her breath made a small cloud in the cold air, and I could see the way her hand was tucked into her coat pocket, the way she always tucked her hand into her coat pocket, the right one, with the thumb out, and I could see that her hair was the colour it had been when she died, with the grey at the temples and the brown still strong at the crown, and she was looking at me, and she was smiling, and she was real. She was real in the way you are real to me right now. I want you to understand, I do not believe in ghosts. I did not believe in ghosts at the moment I saw her. I knew that the thing standing at the north end of the platform at Wexler Avenue was not my mother. My mother is dead. My mother has been dead for 11 years. The thing standing at the north end of the platform was the train's offer, made visible, and it had used everything it had on me to make it irresistible, and it had succeeded, and I knew it had succeeded. I started walking toward her. I was not making a decision. I was walking the way you walk in a dream you cannot wake from. My legs were moving. The platform was sliding under them. The other people on the platform were not looking up. The woman in the green coat was not there. There was no one to stop me. I walked 20 feet. I walked 30 feet. I could see her face clearly. I could see the small crow's feet at the corner of her eyes. I could see the way her mouth was slightly open in a soft, glad expression. She lifted her hand. She lifted her hand the way she had lifted her hand in the dream, to wave. And in the moment her hand came up, I remembered the dream. I remembered what the dream had told me. I remembered that the version of her I had kept for 11 years was not the version standing on the platform, and that if I closed the last 10 feet between us, the version standing on the platform would replace the version in my head, and I would lose her completely, forever, and what I had loved would be overwritten by what the train had built. I stopped walking. I want to be precise about this because it is the only thing I did that mattered. I stopped walking. I did not turn around. I did not run. I just stopped in the middle of the platform about 10 feet from her, and I looked at her face, and I did not close the distance. She kept smiling. Her hand stayed up. She waited. I stood there for I do not know how long. A minute. 2 minutes. The next inbound train arrived on the opposite platform, and people got on it, and the train pulled away, and we were still standing there, the two of us, in the cold, looking at each other. After a while she lowered her hand. The smile did not change. She just lowered her hand and let it fall back to her side, and she looked at me with the same warm, glad, waiting expression. And she did not move. I understood then that she was not going to come to me. The rules of whatever this was required me to close the distance. She could wait forever. She would wait forever. The train could keep her on the platform indefinitely, in her grey coat and her scarf, and every evening I came to Wexler Avenue, she would be there, and every evening I would have to decide, again, whether to walk the last 10 feet. I turned around. I walked back to the south end of the platform. I did not look behind me. I went down the stairs. I came out onto Wexler Avenue at the corner of 6th, and I stood there and breathed for a long time, and then I walked. I walked for about an hour. I walked the perimeter of the neighborhood. I walked along the canal. I walked past the construction site where the woman in the green coats building used to be. I walked past the small park with the 3 trees and I sat on the bench for a few minutes and watched the cold sky go from grey to darker grey to almost black. Then I went back to the station. I went up the stairs. I came out on the platform. She was still there. I want you to know that. She was still there. An hour later, in the dark on a now nearly empty platform in the same coat, by the same bent lamppost, smiling. I sat down on the bench at the south end of the platform. I sat down, and I waited for the next outbound train to Halbrook, and I did not look at her. The train came. The doors opened. I got on. I sat in car 3 on the bench seat against the west window. The doors closed. The train pulled out. I did not look at the platform as we left. That was 4 months ago. I want to tell you what has happened since, because the structure of this thing did not end the way I expected, and I do not know how to end this account except by telling you what is true now. I have not gone back to Wexler Avenue. I have not taken the train. I took a leave of absence from work in early March and have been working remotely since on reduced hours, with the understanding that I am going through a difficult personal period. My supervisor has been kind. I am grateful. I drive when I have to drive. I walk when I can walk. My apartment is the same. Pim is the same, although his arthritis is worse, and the vet has started talking about quality of life in the careful way vets do when they are preparing you for something. My sister visits more often. She does not know what has happened to me. I have not told her, and I am not going to. The train still runs on the line. I hear it from my window sometimes, the regular schedule every 20 minutes during the day. I do not hear the 2 in the morning train anymore, the one that is not supposed to run. I have not heard it since the night I walked away from the platform. I do not know if that means the train has accepted what I did. I do not know if my refusal was a kind of payment. I do not know if standing 10 feet from the thing on the platform and turning around was the small, meaningless ritual the train required, or whether the train will eventually come back and ask again, in some other form, with some other offer. I think about her sometimes. The thing on the platform. I think about whether she is still there, on the bench by the bent lamppost, in the grey coat, smiling, waiting for me to come close enough. I think about the woman in the green coat who must have walked past her every day she rode the line, because the woman in the green coat said she still rides the line, and Wexler Avenue is between her and her job. I think about how she must look out the window of the train every evening and see on the platform at Wexler Avenue a woman in a grey coat by a bent lamppost, and she must know exactly what that woman is. I think about the bald man with the reading glasses on his forehead. I think about the young woman with the earbuds. I think about how many of the people I rode the train with for 6 years were riding with their own offers waiting on a platform somewhere, in a coat they recognized, smiling at them through the window, and how I never noticed because none of them ever stood up. I think about my mother, the real one. I think about her in the kitchen of the house I grew up in, putting away groceries on a Tuesday afternoon, and I think about her in the garden in the blue cardigan, and I think about her at my college graduation in a dress I helped her pick out, and I think about her holding my sister's first child, and I think about her laughing at something I said at Thanksgiving in the last year of her life, and I think, these are mine. These are the ones I kept. The thing on the platform did not get these. That is what I have. That is what I did not trade. I want to end this by telling you something honest, which is that I am not sure I made the right choice. I think about her on the platform, and I wonder what would have happened if I had walked the last 10 feet. I wonder whether the thing the train wanted to give me would have been a horror, or a gift, or something in between that I do not have the language for. I wonder whether the version of me that walked the 10 feet is somewhere in some other life, holding a woman who is and is not his mother. And I wonder if that version is happier than I am. I wonder sometimes late at night, when Pim is sleeping against my leg, and the apartment is quiet, and the train is not running because it is 2 in the morning on a Wednesday, whether she is still standing there, in the cold, by the lamppost, waiting. I think she probably is. I think she will be there for a long time. I think the train is patient and the offer is open, and Wexler Avenue is only 4 stops from my apartment, and I could go any time. That is the part I do not tell my sister. That is the part I am telling you. Not that the train trapped me, not that I escaped, but the door is still open, and the train is still running, and every day I do not get on it, I am choosing not to. And I do not know how many days I have in me of choosing not to, and I do not know what will happen on the day I run out. I have not taken the train in 4 months. I have not stopped thinking about it for a single day.